Suppose that you work for a small social network startup, and due to the rapid increase in users and a demand for better analytics tools, along with an increase in complaints due to data inconsistency, your company has decided to move from a document database into a relational database. Currently, the application supports the following features: user authentication, friends, and interactions. So currently in the document, the data is stored in a non-normalized manner. Really, I'm looking to understand, how would you approach this project? What would your strategy be?
So the first question is like, I know we are trying to, are we trying to, we have a document database, but now that's not working out. It is not scalable or it is inconsistent. So we are trying to move it into a relational database. That's what I understand. But I would like to understand the scope of this database migration or relationship migration, right? So is this database going to be served for like a pure relational data store, or is it going to be served for analytical need? So the main question, my question here is like, is it going to be served for an application database or like a backend database which can be used for analytics or reporting? That's the first question I would like to understand.
There's a demand internally for better analytics tools because we have to deal with an increase in the number of complaints that we're seeing due to data inconsistency. That's the context.
I'm assuming that we are building analytical database here.
Yes.
So then the follow-up questions I have here, like since we are building an analytical database from the document database, so the one thing I wanted to understand, like, are we interested in building up any of the metrics, or it's like pure lift and shift of the document database into a normalized or like basically third normal form database, right? So, or do we have any of the predefined metrics which we are going to solve? If that is the case, maybe probably like we need to look at an alternative, like first ingesting this data into a particular database and then from there building up into a kind of a metrics and dimensions.
Well, think about it like this. I mean, you're building this for analytics tools, right? And what are the types of analytics tools that you think this data would feed into? Who is your primary user or users?
So that's the question. So probably like I would like to understand like for the users and how this data is going to be used also.
Yep.
Is also matter, right? So probably like when you say an analytical database, maybe some like any of the like machine learning application is trying to use this to build any of the models, or like maybe a Tableau or any of the like reporting tools is trying to, or like visualization tools are trying to use and build something.
Yes, I mean that's one angle. But I mean, let's scroll out a bit because I think you're going down the user angle. What are the principles
Mm-hmm.
that you want to build? Like why does this even make sense to do? Why should we migrate a document store database or a NoSQL or even like a NoSQL or even a document database into a relational database given this scenario? Like why does it even make sense?
The primary is like it's maintenance angle, right? Most of the times it is like document database. Like you have all the data, it's like you have user data, like in this case, user data or a friend's data or like interactions are all combined into one single like a JSON object. And I mean, you can query the data, but it's very difficult to like join or like build any of the analytical queries from the document database. Primarily, like what I understood from my experience, like document database is predominantly from application angle, just to try to keep all the data in one place together. But when it comes to analytical side of it, like it is like when the data grows, right, it is very difficult to query or join. So you just migrate to a relational database where it is easy to join and get the information out of it.
If you had to clarify or simplify it for our audience, what are the problems that you are solving for the company and its users by moving data from a document store to a relational store or a relational format? Because basically you're not changing the data itself. You're changing the way and the format in which it's stored. But as a result of doing that,
Correct.
what problems are you attempting to solve given the context that we're seeing a lot more complaints due to data inconsistency?
So one thing we are trying to solve is like it is easy to I mean, organize and where like users can query either from like any of the analytical tools
Okay.
and also the maintenance also, right? So over the period of time when once the database start growing up, it is very difficult to manage from the document database, and maybe it is easy when you have a small volume of data, like query retrieval or bringing the data into any of the tools. But when the data gets migrated, data grows, right? So it is very difficult to bring the data from the document database. So ideally, we have to move it into like a relational database, or like maybe build a star schema or a snowflake schema. It depends on the analytical needs, right? So, but ideally, like just to keep the things simple, maybe it's easy to migrate into a relational database where I mean, it is easy to grow also, right? As over the period of time, you might add additional tables to your social media, right? So right now we are just looking at three different entities, like user and authentication and frames and posts and interaction. Maybe you start adding reels, or like you start adding an additional feature. It is very difficult from looking at the things from the document database, especially from feeding into analytical. So it's easy to add new tables and create that relationship among the entities for better user friendly, and also it is like basically availability, and it is easy to scale the database as well.
Okay. So I think for our audience, I think what I'm hearing is you want to go from a document store to a relational store primarily for three reasons. One is to ensure that data is schematized and it's easy to read, and so that improves quality of data. I think the other one is just integrity, like the data that does sit in these schemas is less prone to corruption and less prone to problems or data loss or errors. And then I think there's also because data is organized in a more logical way, it prevents duplication, which means you're taking up less storage space. So like principally, this is why I think it makes sense to move from document to relational, given this company is really struggling with how do I organize this so that I know what the issues with support tickets really are. Specifically like increase, because they're seeing an increase in the complaints due to data inconsistency. So I think for the audience, when you hear things like inconsistency, try to break that down with the interviewer and understand what does inconsistency mean to the interviewer. Is it that data is disappearing, it's hard to find, it's hard to query, it's taking too long, it's not organized in a logical fashion? So these are part of I would say, the clarifying questions that you should be asking the interviewer. Okay, now let's move forward. I think now that we know why we're doing this, go ahead, your interview.
Okay. So yeah, basically we are like what we understood, like we are trying to migrate from the document database to the relational database. So I would like to break down the question. Basically, this JSON object, like object into a relational object. So I also have a couple of questions, Chinmaya. So if I may go ahead, one thing I just want, by looking at this JSON object on a high level, I'm thinking like you have a user entity, and then you have user is connected to a friend, right? So you have a friends entity. A user can be friends with so many people, or like vice versa. And then one thing I wanted to understand here is there is an object called post object. I'm just trying to understand, is this a post the user created, or is this a post user shared? That's something I'm just trying to understand on this question. And the second question is like, second part of my question is, one thing is like, what is this post entity, or like basically child entity within the parent entity? And also you have an interaction, right? So is this interaction looks like this user ID 1 liked so and so. Is this ID is the post ID, or just wanted to clarify?
Yeah, I think there are certain assumptions that you could make here. I would say for post ID, what assumption makes sense to you to make here?
I think he by looking at this data, I think he might have some interaction with that, but I'm unsure like how that interactions are. Like maybe share or like or something.
So there's an interaction ID in the fifth line, right? So there's a posts ID, and so the assumption that I would kind of make and move forward with is that the post ID really represents a new post, the creation of a post by that user. Yeah.
By this user ID. That's correct.
Because the relationship here that you can draw is one user ID n posts created.
Correct.
Then there would also be another model that would say one ID, n interactions, one ID, one post, n type of interactions with that post.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I got. Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to. I think predominantly, I'm having a little bit clarity on what you're thinking. So can I go ahead and start talking about entities and
Go ahead.
relationships?
Yep.
So I would like to start having like a user ID, which is primarily like maybe I would make it as a primary key, and this would be like maybe integer, and it's again depends on the database we are trying to model. But on a high level, like this would be an integer, and this would be a primary key, and
Mhm.
it would be unique as well. And by default, when you say primary key, it's always like uh, unique and not null as well. And then by looking at like you have a first name and last name, which would be like two different another attribute like f name, and this would be like a varchar. Um, Maybe I'll define it as like it's again very depends on the database we are trying to, but on high level like you'll have another varchar,
Mhm.
and couple of things like though we don't have it in the document database here, but I would like to add couple of more like metadata related attributes. I would say like maybe create date or updated date to just to track the. Am I good here, Chinmaya?
Yes. Yeah, I can see it.
Do you think any of the other attributes? I mean, that's the only thing. Maybe because it's a relational database, we don't have any like logic to store like since it's just a relational entity we are talking about, so we don't have a CD1 or a CD2. All it is trying to do either insert or an update, but we are still capturing the create date and update date.
Yeah, ideally you want to keep tables small, right? Less columns is better because it reduces
Okay.
time to query.
Okay. So do you think is these two are still fine with it, right? The create date and update date.
There's also there's other things that I can think of. What do you think? Because the principle here is CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. Do you think you covered everything? There's one attribute that I'm thinking of that might be useful.
One thing I was thinking, maybe a latest record indicator or something, which I was thinking about it.
What about active or status of the user? Like, are they still registered? Are
Yeah,
they not registered? Is it scheduled for
yeah,
deletion?
we
Things like
can,
that.
we can use active kind of a flag,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe it's like a boolean to just identify the users who are active or inactive. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the one thing I missed. I think we pretty much covered the
Okay.
attributes. So I would like to move on to the next thing like users. So one thing, since even though we have like entity friends, right? So for example, here in this like friends 2, 3, 4, 5, they are also kind of an user, right? So I would like to instead of keeping a friends entity, like I would say like maybe like a relational table like user friends or something. This way I can keep the user ID, which is again this user friends is like what do you call it? It's like a relational table.
Okay.
It's like many to many kind of a table where like
Mm-hmm.
one user can friends with multiple users can friends with multiple. That's how I can create like we can have integer, and then you can have a friend ID, which is again pointing to the user table. Like so, in
Mm-hmm.
this case, we will have based on this data, we will have like four different records: 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5. One thing we need to understand, like, see, maybe like what that way the relationship is like a bidirectional, right? One can be like some records might have like 3 is friends with 5, 3 is with friends with 7. So that's how we can use this table. So this table would be used as like here it will be the key will be kind of I would say like both user ID and friend ID is a combination of the primary key. It's like that's a combination. And then one thing maybe we can also add, like user can add a friend, or like maybe sometimes user can unfriend the person also, right? So that way, maybe we can have is the relationship active or something. That way you can still keep the he like some point in time where you wanted to know how many like friends he was with, right? So to get that information, we might need to keep this information like active friend list or something. Is the
Mhm.
relationship active? And maybe requested it and accepted. Uh, so I would try to see if we can capture some timestamps to just keep like maybe when the relationship has been created or something. But again, I would go back to your statement that we'll just keep the minimal attributes, right? So I'll leave it here for now. Then we can come back and revisit Chennai.
Sounds good.
Then next would be like I'll create so we can have a post table, and then you can have use post created by. So we can have that all. So I would say like we can have a post entity. This
Mhm.
post entity would have like a post ID. Again, this would be a primary key, and then though we don't have much information here, I would like to capture few of the information, right? Like post type. I don't know. I don't remember like what kind of a post type could be, like a regular post or could be a reel. Maybe I would look. I was not sure. Like maybe I'll just keep the post type. Maybe Chinmay, if you can throw some light on like what kind of different post can be user made, or like do we need to capture any need of post type here?
Well, think about it like take an example of Instagram or Facebook where you have a post.
Mhm.
What metadata would you want to include about such a post? What
Like
is a post, really?
something post is something, it could be anything, right? It could be user posting some content about his health, like
What data types can it contain?
data. It's a text.
So I can also, but what about images, video,
Yeah,
audio?
yeah. It can be an image or it can be a video also, right?
It can even be an image that has a disappearing element with it associated too, right? Like it might be
Maybe can
temporary in
capture. I
nature.
mean, yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll keep
So
the
keep it
post
simple.
type.
Let's assume that this is primarily a Facebook style social networking solution, where
Mm-hmm.
users can post things to their profile for their friends and or public to consume.
Correct, correct. Mm. So I would keep the post type as like probably like okay, this can have the information such as like text or image or something.
I guess, does it
And
make
then
sense to have it as a var or does it make sense to have it as a selection, a predefined set of values? And remember, space is an important factor in the design of this.
but, correct. Yeah, I agree with you. But I know it's like when you're looking at the application standpoint, it is selection, right? But when it is storing the data into the database, correct? So that information has to be captured. Uh, but yeah, so depend again. It all depends on
Right.
how much.
Yeah,
What are
I
the
guess the data type itself is fine. I'm curious if you would apply any uh rules to that.
when you say rules to the field from the application?
And why would rules in this specific instance make sense?
Oh, because you are not storing something which is you're not posting something which is not predefined.
Exactly. It's always going to be a certain type of content, right? That's always
Like
going to be
certified.
shared.
Correct.
The
So
challenge
you cannot
becomes that if I
say some.
start, I can say text as txt, I can save it as text, I can save it as different variations, I can just store it as t. The problem is that if you have different variants of the same thing available, it causes data quality issues down the line, which would make it hard for the main users that you're trying to serve, right?
Correct. Yeah, makes sense. So yeah. So that predefined text would be like maybe TS text. If that is
Yeah.
the case, I wouldn't even keep the varchar. Maybe I don't know. I cannot keep this. Maybe varchar one or char one, so that each kind of um, like character represents some kind of thing. Like T represent text, I represent image. Is this what you're trying to say, right? Or maybe we represent video. Is this the right line of thought I'm heading into? Yeah, can you hear me?
Sorry, was there a question for me there?
Sure, just this is what I was trying to.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I agree.
And then maybe I'll
But you
keep
need a
the
lookup
created
table,
one.
right? You may need a lookup table, or you
Correct.
need some sort of like key to be able to say,
Correct.
okay, well, if I start seeing T, what does it mean, right?
Correct. Yeah. Maybe I would say so it can be a kind of a name value pair. So this would be like the lookup ID, which is like primary key. And then you will have value like T, and then you will have a description is like text something. And then we can, instead of post type, we can have like post type ID, and this will be like an integer, and which might represent like 1 or 2. That way, like 1 can refer the type T, depends on the value you're trying to pass here. This is one way to, or like we can just keep the, instead of lookup ID, we can say type value and T as text, and then we can have the varchar 1, and that 1 represents the key. But I would prefer to go with the ID way, so that it is easy to join or look up to get the description in case there is a description change. And then I'll also keep the created by, and also who he's creating the post. Somebody liking, sharing, commenting, which will be on the next. Yeah, I'll keep post table. I'll keep it very simple. Post type ID, and maybe I'll also. Do we also keep some kind of details about the post, right?
Yep.
Post details, like, so if it is an image will be stored somewhere, or if it is a video stored somewhere, and we need to type back the URL associated with it. Post type ID. But when you post something, do you have a name to it? Being like while I posted something on the social media. Chinmaya, like just wanted to understand, like when you have the post details, right? Like it could be a text or image, or like can be a video also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like few so that information, like if it is an information, like one thing, maybe I need your direction. Like for example, if a post is just containing the text, right? So that text can be stored directly in this table. But if it is an image, it can be a URL. We can store the URL, and that URL can be located into any of the drive, right? It can be a box or any.
Yep. Some sort of non-tabular, it's a storage solution, if you want to call it.
Yeah, it can be anything. Like it can be stored in any box.
Yep.
So post type, post details. Have a post detail. URL can be like that. Do you also want? Do you think? I mean, do you think is it better like store? For example, the post just contains the just a text, right? Do you think to store that in the post table, or like I feel like we just need to store into the same table. There's no pointing in like creating some kind of storage link to it, especially the text. Show that.
Let's keep that part out of scope, where we're defining storage requirements for, I would say, non-tabular data.
Okay. So I'll keep the post detail, assuming that I'm just keeping it only the text. I'll just keep varchar. I don't know, maybe based on the limitations, I'll just keep. It's again according to application, and then created by, like, it would be like user ID, again an integer, and posted on, like it will be the date when he posted. In case if they want to know like how many this guy posted in last 1 year or something, or like just to get any of the time information. And then since we are keeping the interactions aside, I think I would keep this. I think we have enough information for the post. Can I move on, Chinmaya?
Yep, makes sense.
And then if you look at here, like we have an interaction and the post ID, I'm thinking. So we'll have an interaction ID, which is like the primary key for this particular table, which is again primary key and integer. And maybe we will have I think the interaction, since it is showing up in an application, maybe we can have an interaction kind of a table for the interaction. Okay, for now I'll just keep interaction type, and then we can come back if there is an interaction type. It could be like 10. It's as of now I'm just keeping this like share or comment, and then interaction by interaction. It's like user ID who is liked or commented this particular content, and then on the post, so you will have a post ID also. This post ID will point to the post table. So this interaction by is nothing but it is connecting to the user table, and the post ID is connecting to this table. So when you have like or type or like share, but when you have comment, right? So probably like that will increase a little bit of scope when comment, right? So user can comment on the post and somebody else can comment on the post. So probably like we need to have a table which is like kind of it's like cyclic kind of a table. Like, so you have a comment, then comment over the comment. So we need to have some kind of a table which allows us to store the lineage of the commenting.
Yep.
But
Makes sense.
I think now I'm just trying to keep that out of it. And post ID and interaction, like when the person has been interacted, right? So that would be kind of and there could be one other thing which usually, like, this is my personal experience, like, since I usually do not share anything as any of the social media environment. So whenever by accident, I still follow it, but I don't interact. But unknowingly, if I like or something, it happens, I always unlike it. So I would like to keep some kind of information to capture, like whether whether the user had done anything and reverted interaction to it and updated date. Maybe I'll keep this like create date. So when the user create date and maybe updated date, which is like a date. And maybe I'll also sometimes people delete it, right? Delete the interaction also. So I would say is active, kind of a boolean. These are the attributes I would think on the interaction entity. Yeah.
Okay. So I think just in the interest of time, can you help me understand if you were to, be a data analyst, and imagine that you were supposed to write a query, do you have everything you need to make that happen? Let's say, a PM came to you, or even one of the stakeholders you were working with said, "Hey, I need to know if every post that's been made in our platform is being tracked and who the most active user is."
Yes. So what we can do is, like, once you identify the user, the most active user would be the one who is either posting or interacting with any of the posts, right? Like number of basically you can identify the active user by like either liking, share, comment, or like posting it. So I think you can join the user to either the post or interaction. So on active, right? So when you say active, so active every week or active is like weekly active user, or like how do you identify? How do you?
Let's say daily and weekly.
Okay. So you have a user so you have posted on.
Let's say user 1, right? There's 10 users in our platform. I want to know, of the 10, who is the most active, and are they active daily? Are they not active daily? I need to define metrics from this data.
So to get the daily active user count, either we can join the user table, and maybe we will get the daily every day. Probably like we need to have a kind of a table called date table. Because you need to join the date. Date is the one which is driving here. So probably I wanted to get the daily active user count, most active user count. You have a user, you have a post. You can user, you can see number of created or updated. I can join daily active user or weekly user. Yeah, probably we need to have a table which stores the date information, Chinmaya. That way it will allow us to join the date table to the user table to the post table. That way I can identify like from the date, these are the users, this day, did they have any interaction? Like, so we can just have a date table through which you can join and identify the interaction. Otherwise, you can still get the interaction like user and interaction. Like dates he interacted, you will get it, but in order to identify the person daily interacted, I would like to keep a date kind of a table.
Okay, I think after this we'll pause and let's do a review. Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I think for our audience, I think how do you think that went? If you were looking back at like, how do you think it went? Or what kind of feedback would you kind of give to yourself?
I think one thing I felt like, I mean, I'm more trying to understand the like purpose of relational migration. I mean, I was trying to quickly jump into the kind of solution mode rather than like trying to understand the one thing which you also helped me. I know some things was in my mind, like I'm trying to quickly jump to the solution. Maybe I should focus more on like trying to understand why we are doing. That why part is something I think I did not do that great. And that's something which I can focus on more in the future mock session. And one other thing I observed, I was just trying to be more focused on like database attributes or something like type or anything like, but instead of thinking about like what's the primary essence, that like am I looking at things like how do I get the daily user count or like monthly user count, like basically what are the analytical needs of it, right? So that's one thing. If I had that in mind, probably like this date dimension, which I could have date dimension or date table, which allows to do left join or inner join to get the daily or weekly user count. That is something I missed. I think I would have kept focus on not only doing a relational migration, why portion of it, and then what portion of it also, right? So
exactly,
like why are we doing it? How are we like doing it, right? So that's
exactly.
that's something I think I felt I missed it.
Yeah, and I think
in
you
terms
hit
of
the nail on the head.
the user, the entities relationships, I think kind of fairly done a decent job.
Nice. Yeah. In general, I agree. I mean, basically, it's very easy when you get a question like this to go straight into, let me define the tables, let me define the fields in those tables, let me define the data types, and let me define stuff like that. And that is solutioning. Why I think a lot of candidates sometimes miss the fact that you need to kind of investigate further. This is why clarifying questions are really important at the beginning, is to understand like what is the interviewer trying to get you to accomplish here. If the idea here is like build me a database diagram, sure, this is the right approach. But given this question was, how should we migrate from a document to a relational store? That should bring up a lot of questions. Why do we even need to do that? Why does it make sense? Who are we building this for? Who is going to be using this type of data? And a lot of that was kind of buried in the prompt. So that's why I've kind of prompted you. It's like, the types of ways this data will be used is for visualization, querying. You'll be dealing with SQL analysts. You're building for them ultimately. But more than that, there were issues with consistency, meaning one query, if today was made in a document store, it could result in different results for the same question over and over again. And that's what we wanted. So at the beginning, you always want to set the right tone for what are the principles that you're going to use to build this solution? Why does it make sense? Who are you building this for? What kind of use cases do you expect them to encounter? How do you expect them to use this data? Are they visualizing it? Are they putting it into a tabular format? Are they joining it with anything else? Is this going to be updated on a daily basis? How many times is it going to be updated on daily? Is it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times? The larger, the more higher the frequency of the update cycle, more lighter you want to make sure the query is, because you're not going to have a lot of time to run it. You don't want to spend a lot of time computing some of the things, and especially as this data grows, there's a need to ensure that it stays that it's scalable, right? So that's one of the other principles that you want to keep in mind. Scalability, I think I see on the right as well. So a lot of these things, I mean, this is basically, it's hidden as a system design question. And so I would really encourage our audience to ensure that when you're doing questions like this is a product, there's as much as the technical understanding, the technical architecture is important, those are usually derived from product requirements. And it's really important to ensure that you're on the same page as the interviewer about the requirements that you're really solving for. So there is a gathering requirements portion of this that actually needs to be completed prior to doing the solutioning. Now, at the end, I kind of prompted you to say, hey, test your understanding of your own solution. Put yourself as a SQL analyst and say, someone comes to you and says, what's the daily active user count? And that's what will help ensure that you're on the right track. Ultimately, the user should come first for this data, and then being able to like fact check or gut check what you're building against that persona helps ensure that you're on the right track, because it's really easy to get lost in this stuff as well. And so personally, I also would have appreciated if like there was like a high level entity relationship diagram of some sort that I could say, here are the tables that you're building, here are the relationships between the tables, before going into the specific columns and the data types within them. So things like user table, I think we hinted at it before, user table, friends, posts, interactions. The user table would have an end-to-end relationship with friends, because you can have one user, you can have many users interact with many friends. And I think you mentioned that at the beginning. And then does it make sense to actually have a hard link between friends and interactions? Now that would be a question worth exploring before we start getting into like column design and data design. You see what I mean? So it's important to like get at least in principle agreed upon with your interviewer a high level like approach to this problem, a system approach, before you start going into the details. But overall, yeah, it was a great sample, and I think our audience could benefit from things like this. And there's a couple books that I could also that I would also recommend. And this is a constant, I would say, learning area of learning for even the most experienced engineers. I'd also encourage people that are interested in interviews like this, like to explore blogs from Netflix or Airbnb, where they actually publish their latest engineering designs and why decisions and the trade-offs that they considered when making some of these decisions. So overall, great stuff. And then, so I'd like to take this time to also just share a couple of testimonials with our audience about the interview query platform. One of the users named Sri Charan talked about how what interview query did was to make him accustomed to all of these questions time and time again as they keep coming. So then in an interview, it's really about practice. And in an interview, when somebody asks this kind of question, it doesn't sound so foreign or Latin to him. And so he knew what to do with the information because of the practice that he got on this platform. And Rohan had very similar kind of feedback. Rohan mentioned that the interview query videos helped him with solving problems like investigative case studies. And when he interviewed for a company called Discover, the rounds went well because of the practice he got. So ultimately, this type of interview is really at the core of it. It's about practice, dealing with different types of design problems, and understanding what's going on from a business requirement standpoint with the interviewer before you start approaching the question. So Ganga, any words of wisdom for our audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing is, again, just my personal experience. I mean, recently, I don't want to say it, but yeah, I kind of failed one of the FANG interview. But just after clearing my initial coding round, before entering into a loop round, that's when I discovered interview query. It's like there was a 1 month of intense preparation went in through the interview query, both SQL, Python, and also especially the system design or like kind of a product sense. I mean, I know I could not clear that interview, but that's when like I was just more into this kind of a platform. It gives end-to-end structure to the solving of any of the FANG related interviews. So I would love to come back to this kind of a platform. I always wanted to spend time in it because it gives that systematic experience in solving the system design, especially like the framework, like what and why we are building it. And I could not, I could not practice more, but yeah, that is something uh, everybody wants, especially the production side of the things, right? Most of the people are like, in fact, myself, like, could not clear that interview because of the pure production. I was just reading it, but could not put it into practice, like especially the framework. And I tried to do today, and I think I still need to do it better.
Nice. Okay. So with that in mind, thanks to everyone for tuning in. And so we'll see you on the next episode of Interview Party.
Thank you.